Today I'm talking to Eddie Borup, who has had a career over 30 years working in programs and project management. He's going to talk to us about imposter syndrome, learning from a number of engineers to realise there's more than one way of doing it, the challenges of working remotely with 1,500 staff before we had Teams and before we had Zoom, the fact that the simpler we can make things, the more likely we are to get people to follow them. Some lessons from his army days of giving penance to people who don't follow his rules by the means of asking them to do documentation every day to actually pay back for not doing what they should have done. A fascinating journey, so please join me and listen to Eddie Borup. Welcome to this episode of Implementing Best Practice in Business. We're here to help you and your organisation understand and implement global best practice to help you face the business challenges of today. Join me, Richard Pharro, CEO of APMG International, in talking to leaders and practitioners who have applied these frameworks and practices to boost their productivity. They're here, willing to share their knowledge and experience to help you learn from them so you can do the same to make you more competitive in today's market. Welcome to this edition of the podcast. Today my guest is Eddie Borup, someone who I've known for 20 to 25 years in a very wide variety of roles. And I'll let Eddie explain his varied career and how he got to where he is today. So Eddie, you're the only person that I know who's run projects in the military, in the private sector, civil government, and for NGOs. So you're ideally placed to answer a very simple question for me. What is the key to success? Is it process? Is it people? Or is it culture?
So let's deal with the background first. Traditional, to start with, is the way I would probably put it. 21 years in telecommunications, starting as a boy, as an apprentice, and then working through across in various things from technical to projects to line management to senior management, eventually reporting to the CEO during a merger. And realised then that although the role was okay, what I missed was knowing the people, knowing the staff. So the job before I had that was head of projects and program management. I think that's when you and I first met. We were an early adopter of Prince 2, 102 people in the practice, delivering all the client-focused work. And there came a point in that journey when I had to just make a decision. Do I stay and finish my years in that sector?
Get the big pension and get the gold watch.
Yeah. All those things. Or do I go? So there was an opportunity to leave through redundancy. And in doing so, I set out to do something very simple, which was I thought I would become a contract project manager because it seemed, having been a head of project, it was well paid, great day rate, and you would only get given one project at a time. But what I didn't counter for was, if you call in that period, this is the late 90s, there weren't that many ATOs still. There were no concept of ACOs at the time, accredited consulting organizations. So I was getting phone calls from all the training organizations in Prince 2 saying they had a client who had done training but still wasn't able to use it effectively. Could I help them? And it got to a point where there was a large tender out, and I'd been approached by 3 of the training companies. I was the sole resource from all 3 on their bids. I was going to get the work every time, regardless who won it. It made no difference. And I think that's when I came to see you again now, probably for the first time outside of corporate life, to sort of talk about, well, is there such a thing as consultancy? And can we get that accredited? And I don't know if you ever looked at the figures, but for the first 5 years of the ACO, there was only 3 of us.
Yeah.
And actually only 2 that were operating. And as long as they met my competitor, I would win. And So for a period, I had a very good chance of winning most bids, and I wound up with some incredible clients, the UN, helping to implement Prince 2 and others. And then I was approached by ILX to have the consultancy bought. They wanted a one-stop shop. Thought about it. I'd never really had a dream to become a company owner. It grew, and was quite happy then to sell it. But a year later, having transitioned everything in, I went to work for one of my largest clients in the development sector, doing work in international NGOs, and some of the interim work for governments through it. Fascinating period. That culminated in being appointed as head of program in South Sudan, working for one of the UN agencies. I arrived 3 days before the conflict broke out, spent the first 18 months there, and realized that I could work in those environments. So I was being offered other posts in similar environments, but chose wisely to come home and see my family again for a while. And the military side, I did 10 years in the Territorial Army, and again in a similar thing. Started at the bottom as a soldier, but realised how daft that was when my first NATO exercise, and I'm digging holes for weeks on end, and the officers got people to dig the holes for them. So I came back, asked if I can become an officer, and it took a couple of years. But I was 29 when I went through Sandhurst. It was quite late. But then went on to sort of rapidly catch up. So the career has been more of a journey, and some repeatable patterns in there. Like I peak out at about 140 staff, because beyond that, people have to remind me who they are, and I don't like that style of leadership. I do like to know who they are, what they do. And I also like to know what people do, but I don't have to be able to do it. But I do like understanding things in order to try to get my head around their problems.
So people is the answer.
Yeah,
so
people.
From what you're saying, it's all about the people, is it?
It is, because it's the people that we have the greatest control over, I think. And when I was at Capital Wireless, the strategy I came up with, I used Maslow as a symbol in terms of a triangle. And starting at the bottom, it was accountability. What am I accountable for? And then roles was above that. What roles do I need to deliver that accountability? And then it was competencies. What are the competencies I need in each role? And then the people. And I figured, at that point, if I have the right people with the right competencies in the right roles, and we're focused on the right things, we're going to deliver extraordinary results. Above that was then process, but it had to support the people. Tools that had to support the processes and the people. Training in those things, separate from development above that. So not developing people, but training them first and then developing them to sort of hone. And the tip of the triangle was, the classic, it's your objectives. It's what we're trying to achieve. So that, and we were able to use that red, amber, green, both horizontal and vertical, in terms of a simple way of measuring our on track to deliver those. But I think the model still applies even if you're an individual project manager. Do you know your accountabilities? Do you know what role you're doing? Most project managers seem to combine accidentally the role of support, delivery, team manager and project manager. Are they sure they know what they're doing? And then do they have the competencies and so on and so forth? So I still think it's valid.
Fascinating idea. Your work with the UN, if I remember correctly, you developed or implemented a program office working remotely because you were in different parts of the world. Now, this was long before COVID-19. And so you were a pioneer probably about hybrid working or remote working or working electronically, whatever you want to do it. What lessons would you give? What advice would you give to people? Now we're all being forced to work remotely, to use telecommunications, to use Zoom, to use whatever it is. And that looks like it's going to be life like that for the next few years, certainly.
Well, certainly the start of that implementation was at a headquarter level. and before the days of Zoom, Skype at best. And it was really pure economics of how do you have 1,200 project managers around the globe, all delivering. Yes, each country is on its own, but you can't have everyone reinventing the standard. So hub and spoke at best was the sort of model. But what we found was it was about making it a family, so that it didn't matter how far away someone was, they felt part of the practice. Also having simple tools that people had to use. So, reduce some of the choices. But I think that the thing that worked the most was a very simple community rule. So again, we didn't have in those days some of the advances we have with Office 365 and others. So we just had, once you were in the practice and you'd done your induction, you were added to an email distribution group. One very simple rule: never hit reply all. And that was it, because with that rule, it worked. Without that rule, it was chaos. And so a new project manager popping up in Peru could just go on, hey, I've just joined. I met a few people when I was in Copenhagen. But I'm doing a dam, or I'm doing a road, or I'm doing an infrastructure. Have we got any other examples of this? And you would get 2 or 3 people not hitting reply all, just, replying saying, hey, I've done that. I'm so-and-so. This is the time zone. Do you want to ring? Or the project file is online. Because again, we had everything. That was one of the first things that we did, was, the ability to look online on the website and get down to project details, because we had to have transparency. But really the next reiteration was then in South Sudan, where at the ground level, how do you work when everyone is evacuating? So it then, timely, because we were one of the few agencies where we didn't take everyone out. We took most of the international staff. There was only 2 of us left in. The national staff went home anyway during the initial conflict. And it was really that being there and realizing, okay, well, we can go to Kenya and operate if need be. We can, if it's safe to operate in certain parts of the country, we could still do it. But how do we control this, again, in a more virtual environment? And in that, all we did was, again, simple systems, but firmly enforced. So I just did a deal with the project managers that we wound up bringing back in and saying, you will update this spreadsheet in SharePoint every Friday by 12 o'clock. In exchange, you will never have to do another highlight report. And so we just got the data entered where we needed it. A really unsexy spreadsheet within SharePoint, Office 365 as it is now. And we would then have a little program that displayed it as a graph on our homepage, so that it didn't matter where I was. I could log into SharePoint. My director could log in. My regional director, Copenhagen, could log in. So everyone knew our status, and it was up to date once a week on a Friday. Therefore, we could truly manage by exception. So I think
Did anyone break the rule?
Yes. Yeah.
And what happened?
Yeah, they did highlight reports every day. Which is I apologize for that, because that's command and control, and I am a control freak. But it was understanding that, and I think this is where they need to do, which is, we are in a what's the horrible phrase? We're in a burning platform with COVID. It's forced change, but you can see the embers are starting to die out a little bit. And I just think we need to blow on the embers for a little bit longer to force some of the behavior change, because, it is madness to think that we have to go back to the way that we were, unless back is better to the way it is now. And I think from a support point of view and from a management point of view, I would rather have my project managers putting their finance figures, their updates straight into a single database, even if it's Excel, then I can see information as graphically as I need to in order to make decisions.
I agree with you. I can't see us going back to the way we were. Having worked from home for the last 18 months with people with the equipment, most of the people within my organisation are saying they will come into the office probably one day a month for a catch-up, physical catch-up with the team, probably lunch rather than work. And it's been flipped on its head because we've proven you can work very successfully remotely. So why would you then have that commute both ways when you can do exactly the same at home?
I would go one step further, Richard. For generations now, when we teach project management, we talk about a virtual team. We've talked about that it's a dispersed team. So this is the first time that I would say that the profession has been forced to work in the way it says it has always worked. Because ultimately, as a project manager, why would you need to be physically in the office? What's the likelihood the whole team is in the same office anyway, and they're reporting to you? So and this is one of the conversations we had with one of someone I'm working with at the moment, which was they wanted to pause the program. I said, but this is what we're here to do. We're here to work virtually. So let's role model it. Let's continue working in the project. And actually, it's been a huge success. So I do think, though, we mustn't think that the answer is in complicated tools. I think it's still governance, it's still control, and it's being a little bit of creative and start to challenge more of what we're being asked to do.
Talking of creativity and challenge, congratulations on obtaining your MSc recently in Program Project Management. And I also know you achieved the Praxis Framework Professional, which of course is the accolade of all project managers today. And you've even applied to become a charter project manager. What inspired you to go through all this? You've been around, you've done all this thing, you've got a fabulous CV, you've worked on some brilliant projects, you really have nailed how people can deliver in what Antonio Rodriguez calls the project economy. So why do you push yourself through that academic route?
I think you've been very polite in the way that you word it. Why at my point in my career should I do all these things? And I think
you might like to think that, Eddie.
I think there are three answers I'd like to give you, and two, if we're not careful, become the glib responses that we'll accept. The first one is I genuinely am committed to continual development and learning, and therefore it just fits in with the way I've always done things in my life. The second one is I believe I have suffered from what is commonly called imposter syndrome, because I am an ex-apprentice. I left school. I didn't go to university, hardly any normal qualifications, and everything has been through on the job, or when I left, it's through the, if you like, the profession or the areas I do. So I think that was there as well. But I actually, there is a third reason, and it's the deeper one. I've being honest, Richard, I thought I was getting cynical with the profession. The more I did, the more I saw, and the more I didn't see change. I'm still seeing things that I saw when we first met in all those decades ago. And it's not, and I do not believe I was ahead of the time. I don't believe I was some genius. I think I was trying to resolve how to improve delivery. And what I wanted to find out was, is it me? Is it just I need to stop because I'm getting cynical, or am I lacking some other knowledge? And what it's helped me do is rationalize that yes, for the last 30, 40 years, most things that we do have been around, and we're not changing as a profession as much as we think we are. And I'll just give you one, and it sort of comes into the dissertation, which was around benefits. Are there barriers to delivering benefits. So and again, without getting wholly academic about this, Terry Cook Davis, who I know you and I both know, wrote a brilliant paper in around the year 2000, 2001, which really set out that there was this distinction that needed to be made in that project success used to be measured in the triangle, time, cost, scope, or time, cost, quality. And he debunked that. He said, no, that's project management success. Project success is really about the achievement of the goals, the benefits. And then later from that, they sort of started to coin the distinction between efficiency, projects management success, versus effectiveness. So the ability to deliver the goals. And having seen firsthand on my travels, projects that have won awards but have never been used. And the reason they won awards is because they were on time and to cost and to the scope, and yet not used. So that can't be right. And so we do. We have a systematic issue at the moment, I believe, in that if we take, we take the original OGC stuff and now Axelos, and I know it's going on from that. As you know, there is no design authority around the 3 key manuals. So there is no connectivity unless you do it yourself. If we take the whole process, we have international standards, national standards. There's no automatic alignment to these things if we look at the qualifications that are out there. So how do they promote benefits when actually they're still focused on time, cost, quality? So there is a disconnect in everything. It's starting to gel together, but not fast enough. And so I think, ultimately I wanted to equip myself with a better understanding of why we do some of the things, so I can try to figure out if there's something we can do about it.
It's interesting because I can see that emergence. You're talking about it, Eddie Obeng talks about it, Antonio Rodriguez talks about it. And it's all about, what is the focus of what we're trying to do and how do we get the benefits out of what we're trying to do? And how do we rethink the link between projects and programs and strategic outcomes? And it's fascinating talking to you about this because clearly for the last 50 years, people have been developing and expanding bodies of knowledge. The body of knowledge has gone from probably 100 pages to 600 pages. There's more frameworks, there's more processes, there's more tools. And do you think it's making life more difficult rather than making life easier? And because it is all codified, then people think they can pick up the code, apply the code, and get to success, when in reality, the code is there to help you think about what you don't have to do in a particular environment. And to what you say, to keep it simple. What are the simple tools you use? So if you were back in your days in telecom, knowing what you know now, how would you have approached the problems then to make it lighter, simpler, quicker, and focused on benefits?
Yeah. So I think the very first thing is picking up on your last words, the focus on benefits. And although in the private sector, we've got to be careful that we don't always interpret that just as achieving profit and so on and so forth. But so let's take a real example of how it is making it more complicated or not helping. Let's put it that way, and oversimplifying things. In program management, we've learnt that there are benefits, and we've learnt the language of activities, outputs, outcomes, capabilities somewhere in between there being developed, and then achieving the benefits or the results or impact, and then hopefully we achieve the goals. So we've got a better understanding of the sequence of change, if you like, that has to happen. And in the body of knowledge, certainly in APM's body of knowledge, there is still the concept of an extended life cycle. that says, you don't have to have a program to get benefit. You just, the rule has always been in project management, the project ends when you say it ends. So what's wrong with actually having the project still include outcomes? It's no difference. And if we then look at other parts of the world, so international development, who use the theory of change or results-based planning or results-based management, they've always worked backwards from the result or the benefit and worked backwards to the interim indicators. And then what do we have to do to get those? And then they have things like results-based budgeting because their stream of work is connected to delivering a benefit. So for me, I think the thing I would have absolutely done differently is that integrated planning. Again, we have words for this in the competency combined planning or integrated planning. And yet, we've gone full force down this concept of employing BCMs who do the benefit planning in isolation to the program manager who does the implementation plan. And we're getting SROs to sign off the program when there's no connection between the program plan and the business case in the true sense of, could you look at the program plan and absolutely say it will deliver the benefits if there's not an integrated plan? And I think this is, I know it's an anorex example between two people who understand it, but
two anorex.
Yeah, but this is why all those methods are not helping, because on the glossy cover and inside is some good stuff and it will work-ish. But because there's no design authority, because there is no integrated planning about how all these things fit in together, you either have to wait until you can afford to go to university and have experience and stick at it to start to understand how these things feed in. But in the meantime, there are tons of organizations and people who rightly believe that they're doing the right thing, and that's because we've not yet sort of joined all the dots. So, going back in time, that would be the biggest change, which is do all the planning from the end result, not the end product. Interesting, in the latest version of Prince 2, right at the final sentence of product-based planning, it just says, you can do working backwards from the benefit instead of the end product if this helps. And that's it. There's no expansion. I mean, at least it's there now, but it's like, what do you do with that? And that's the sort of thing that will probably never get picked up in an exam, never get picked up and just explored. To say, well, hang on, if I can work backwards from the result or the benefit, then what is
that? Sounds like an ideal topic for your PhD.
Yeah. Then we're having this conversation 5 years.
So, Eddie, to finish with, if you could give 3 pieces of advice to somebody who's starting out in project management, based on a really eventual career, lots of really real-world experience, what would be those 3 nuggets that you would want to share?
Yeah. So I'll probably cheat a little and use 3 broad ones. But the very first one is know your tradecraft, as I call it. Don't get blinded by just one ism. And that's, give a plug. This is why I like Praxis. We're able to look at delivery as opposed to worry about what P word we're talking about. But equally, you should still do your basics and, understand the different ways of doing risk, different ways of doing things, and don't limit yourself to just one. So know your tradecraft. And I think the other one is about knowing self. Know your own competencies, your capability, what you're going to hide because you don't like doing it, what you can exploit because it's useful. So know yourself as well. So know your tradecraft, know self. And I think the final one, and I can put words to this now because of, I think, the masses, is make sure that you can think critically. Critical thinking, challenge everything. I don't mean challenge as in stroppy adolescent teenager who doesn't want to do it, but challenge. If your gut is telling you that that doesn't sound right, then figure out how to say that and explore it. Because I'm sure you're aware, most of the stuff that we do is 40 or 50 years old. And I'm not saying that makes it wrong. And what I'm saying is what we should be challenging is if it's the right thing. I'll just give, if I've got time, one simple example: risk. For 40, 50 years, we've been keeping logs, registers. And yes, it might have been a spreadsheet that you hand wrote at one stage, and then eventually a spreadsheet, maybe an Access database. But fundamentally, you're describing the risk fully. You're doing impact and likelihood assessment, proximity, then all your options, blah, 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 and keeping it in a log. But does it work? Is it managing risk or is it logging risks? So, what is a twist on that? Well, still do the analysis. You still have to describe it properly. Cause, event, effect, I still think works brilliantly. Impact, likelihood, proximity, and stop. Go to your plan, put the date. Now work backwards. What are you going to do to reduce the likelihood? Work back again. What are you going to do to reduce impact? Work forward. What are you going to do when the risk happens? And then actually allocate it as if it's a deliverable or a work package, and monitor it as such. And then you're managing risk. You're integrating it. And it's back to, again, understanding the concept of a combined plan, integration of these things. Because then you're truly managing the risk. And it's things like that I think if you know your tradecraft, you know yourself, and you challenge everything, critically, not, as I say, not a stroppy, I don't want to do it, but a proper challenge. Why do we do it that way? I can't wait for the day, I walk into a room and someone says, Alexa. And we're using, and not for technology for the sake of it, but what are we doing differently that supports the tradition that works, but enables us to do it in a different environment?
Well, as long as Alexa doesn't recite every body of knowledge and every framework and every tool that exists in the world, we might make some progress. Yeah. Eddie, fascinating talking to you. Thank you very much for finding the time to share your thoughts on a really, really tremendous career and a lot of experience. And I have to say, as a role model of someone who came through, to use your own expression, an apprenticeship, albeit with a well-known organisation, you're a great inspiration to people who don't want to go to university, who can't afford to go to university, and actually think there must be a better way of coming into work. And I'm sure those first 5 or 6 years, learning on the job with some great mentors and teachers around you in a telecom company, enabled you to take this very individual and pragmatic view about if it works, use it, and if you can't make it simple, don't use it, and keep it as simple as you can. Thank you very much for sharing your time. Some final words from you.
Well, just going to build on that. I think the apprenticeship analogy is really good. What you're also able to see is that every time you change the engineer that you work with and they do it differently, it still works. And so you're also absorbing the fact that there's more than one way to make something work. And it's trying to find the way that helps you do it differently. But it's been great to speak to you again, Richard. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks a lot, Eddie. Bye.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening. We're always keen to hear your feedback and suggestions for future episodes. You can find all the information in the show notes below. Please visit apmg-international.com to find out more about our accredited training and the certifications that support them that are related to the topics discussed in this series. I hope you've enjoyed today, and I look forward to you joining future episodes while we continue our exploration into best practice and the benefits it brings to global business. Thank you.